Okay, so in this lecture, we're going to finish off from where we left off in the previous lecture. So just to recap, in the previous lecture, we managed to implement a functionality that makes the user get information, that is statistics pertaining to COVID-19, that is globally and by country. So yeah, this is the code that we wrote in the last lecture. So in today's lecture, we're going to focus on, okay, let me just put a dash on this, just to give it the sense that we're done with it. So in this lecture, we're actually going to focus on giving the user the ability to search for diseases here, and also to search for the symptoms of a disease here, and then the causes of a certain disease. So searching for the cause of a certain disease will likely be when the user actually searches for a disease. So to start off, what we're going to do is we're going to add sort of like a new term here. For example, remember, if our user says hello, it's going to say, hi, I'm a medical chatbot assistant, and it's going to give us a single option. So we're going to add another option here. We just do \n for a new line, and then 2 dot, and then let's say disease knowledge base. I'll call it knowledge base. You can call it whatever you want since it's your chatbot, but I'll call mine disease knowledge base. Disease knowledge base, yes, of course. Okay, so since I'm done, I'm going to pause for a while so that I can connect my WhatsApp web, so that I can test the chatbot with you. Okay, so my WhatsApp web has started, so we can continue with the tutorial. So what I'm going to do is, okay, we have added this new function. So what we want to do is we want to check if we receive, if a user actually says 2 or actually writes 2, we need to activate this disease knowledge base function. So we're going to check the message from the user. For example, if you remember, we checked here if the message from the user is 1. So here we're also going to check if the message from the user is equals to true. All right. Okay. So what I'm going to do is activate my virtual environment. And for your own information, if you can't activate your virtual environment, if you're having errors activating virtual environments, just use it as it is. Don't worry about using a virtual environment. It will still work all the same. Either you're using a virtual environment, you're not using a virtual environment, the code will still work, everything will still work. Just follow along the tutorials and it will work. So I'm just going to activate my virtual environment, source, Chatbot, and then scripts, and then activate. Okay, so I would have to reload my VS Code. It seems my extensions haven't loaded, so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to restart it. So I'm just going to close this out, then let's start it again. All right, so let's get coding. Okay, so our first line of code is going to respond if a user actually says 2. That's when we are going to actually respond to that user. Okay, so what we are going to do is we're going here, and then under this response statement, just press enter and then backspace. See, so my if statement would actually align with the top if statement here, if COVID in message dot lower. So we are going to say if, and then msg dot lower is equal to, and then 2. What we want to respond to the user, we're going to give the user a response dot message, and then what we want to message, let's just say disease knowledge base activated. This is knowledge base activated. So what we want to happen is we're going to utilize the power of keywords. We want a situation where the user actually puts a keyword and then gets the response pertaining to that keyword. So for example, here we're going to say the user sends a keyword disease followed by the disease that the user wants to search, and then the chatbot responds with that disease information. For example, if the user wants to get symptoms pertaining to a certain disease, all the user has to do is just use the keyword symptoms and then the disease that he or she wants to get symptoms for. So let's just say to get information about a disease / line, use keyword disease, e.g. disease malaria. Okay, and then we have to respond, return str response. And then maybe we can also add the new thing about the symptoms. To get symptoms information, use keyword symptoms. Let's just bold it, use keyword symptoms, and then we just make it bold. Okay, all right, and then we return this message to the user. All right, so let's check it if it's working. So activate or reactivate my scripts /activate. Okay, then I'll just go flask run. Okay, so for your own information again, so what happens with ngrok every time you start it, what it does, it actually gives you a new URL. So for example, if you remember, this is a local development environment. If you start it, it's going to give you a new URL, and then you need to go replace the URL that you previously used in Twilio. So I'll demonstrate. For example, I'm going to fire up my ngrok. So what I'm going to do first, I'm going to navigate into the C drive, navigate to your C drive, and then users, and then your username, and then find the folder .ngrok2, and then delete the ngrok.yaml file. It causes a lot of errors. That's why we are currently deleting it. Okay, so I'll open my Windows terminal here, and then open your ngrok dashboard, click on your auth token, copy your auth token, open your terminal, just type ngrok auth token, and then just paste it in your auth token, enter. Okay, saved, and then type ngrok http 5000. So it will give us a new URL. So this is our new URL. Let's just copy it and then navigate to Twilio, messaging, settings, WhatsApp sandbox settings. And then replace this previously used URL. And then don't forget to put your endpoint /SMS. It depends with your endpoint. Mine is /SMS from here. So it just depends with your endpoint. So mine is /SMS. Sorry. And then I'll just save it. And then I'll click try it out and then send a WhatsApp message. So I'll just copy this to activate my WhatsApp sandbox. and then I'll just paste it here. Okay, let's check if everything is working. Hello. Okay, so everything is working. We have this new function, disease knowledge base. So if you check on ngrok, it says 200, it's okay. And then what if I send 2? Okay, so to get information about the disease, use the keyword disease, e.g. disease malaria. To get symptoms, use the keyword symptoms followed by your disease. I will refactor this to make it look good in the next lecture. Okay, so what we want to happen is let's get an instance where the user actually says disease malaria. Then we offer the user information pertaining to malaria. So in this lecture, we're actually going to utilize our own API that we currently developed. So it's actually hosted on Heroku. So the link for this API, I've actually put it at the bottom. It's this one, disease-info-api.herokuapp.com/diseases. So just for demonstration purposes, I'm just going to copy it. And then I'm going to paste it in my browser so that you see how an API works. So an API is just an endpoint which just gathers information, and then you actually utilize that information. Okay, just paste it there and check if it's working. Let's wait for it. Okay, as you can see, the API is actually working. All this information is actually outputted by the API, diseases, symptoms, all this information. And this information is actually coming from WHO, World Health Organization. So it's legit information, it's checked and everything. Okay. So this is the API that we're currently going to use. As you can see, we're going to be fetching this data right here. We're going to be using all this data right here. Okay, so let's tackle the first part of the project. So what you're going to do on the first part of the project is to actually get, when a user actually says disease or uses the disease keyword, if you remember from the previous lecture, this is the same like what we did here. When we checked if there is a COVID keyword in the message sent by the user, that's what we are going also to use. You'll see it's very similar, so just press enter here, backspace. The if statements have to align. So I'm going to say if disease in MSG, right? If disease in MSG, like if we get a disease in the message that we receive from the user, what are we going to do? We're going to put this into a variable called message, or anything, any name that you want message is equals to, and then we're going to replace msg.replace. We're going to replace the disease that we get, the disease keyword that we get from the user with nothing, and then we're going to strip so that we can remove any trailing spaces from the message. As you can see, this is actually the same thing that we're just doing. We're actually doing the same thing here. So it's the same thing. And then we also need to put the URL that we need. So we are going to make use of this request if you hadn't imported it, import requests. And then so let's proceed. And now let's request something. So we're just going to utilize the same thing that we did here, but for outputting our URL. So we're just going to say URL or anything that you want, and then just put your URL. So URL, just put this URL. This is the URL that we're going to use. Okay, like this. And then HTTP, not HTTPS, HTTP://. All right. So how are we going to get information pertaining to diseases? So if you check our API, it says diseases and it gives information on a variety of diseases. But we want to access individual diseases. So the endpoint allows us to actually append a disease here by saying, for example, slash malaria. It will give us information, as you can see, information to malaria. So we are going to utilize this to our advantage. We are going to put a placeholder here and then actually replace this placeholder with the user's message with the user's disease. So what you're going to do is slash diseases, right? And then we have to put a placeholder here, which is %s. That's how we put a placeholder in Python. And then outside here, I'm going to say % message. So we're saying replace this placeholder with the disease that the user actually requests. Okay, right? That's the same thing there. And then we need to get a response or a result. You can call it result, whatever you want. Is equal to requests dot request. Request, and it asks us for a method. Which method are we going to use? We're going to get this information, comma, and then it asks us for the URL. We're just going to pass in the URL here. And then secondly, we need to actually load this data into a JSON object. Remember, we did it here, right? So we actually need to load it. Maybe we cannot even load it if you don't want to load it. Okay. But for us, let's actually load this information. Okay. So results. So we are getting the information from there. And then what you're going to do, let's call it data is equal to JSON. That's how we imported JSON. JSON.load response.text, but we are using results. We're using results to text. Alrighty. So now we are going to fetch this text thing. Remember, we are using an API. We now need to use sort of like a method of actually fetching the data that we need. So for example, I'm going to call this explanation. Explanation is equal to, and then I'm going to say data and then brackets. As you can see, let's look at the previous one. This is how we actually get information that we want. So we are saying data, we are actually referencing the whole data. I'll give an example here. When you say data, we're actually referencing this whole data here. So data, let's just imagine it's this whole data here. And then, but we want, we don't want the whole data. What we want is actually the disease for this whole data. We want the disease for this whole data. So we need to access these diseases, and then we need to access these facts. So you use a hierarchy here. First of all, you access diseases, and then you access facts. So facts is going to give us information pertaining to our disease. Okay. So that's what we are going to use. So disease, and then facts. Disease, facts. Disease, and then facts. So that's what we're going to use. So let's just say from that data, what we want is, what we want is to access the disease, and then after the disease, for that disease, what we want are facts. So we're just getting this information from the API. We want the disease, and for that disease, we want the facts. It will give us this information here, this information here. Okay, so let's proceed. And then we need to store this information into an array list. So you can just go here, just press enter after the colon, just say I'll call this data list or anything into an empty array. And then we need to append, like what we did from the top here. We need to append, so let's just say data list dot append, and then we want to append the explanation here. Alright, and then we need to give this response to the user, response.message, and then what do you want to message to the user? We want to message a string of this array. So we're going to say data list. So if you don't write string, it's actually going to give you the information as an array. So we don't want that. And then remember, we have to return the response. So return string response. Alrighty. So let's check if that actually works. So stop the save flask run. Okay, let's check the moment of truth. Okay, so I'm not going to follow the whole procedure. I'm just going to say disease, just straight to the point. Disease, malaria. Send it. Okay, so it worked. As you can see, we've been given information pertaining to malaria. Let's try another disease cholera. Okay, it worked. As you can see, we have information pertaining to cholera. But if you actually see, we have these trailing brackets that we don't want our users to see. Is very distracting. So how do we remove these ones? We actually use string exploding in Python. So how do you do it? You go to your response. Remember, this is when we are actually giving the user a response. Just go in between the brackets, yeah, and then put this square brackets, and then we have to define sort of like where we want to start and where we want to end. So we want to start, let's check it again. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 0, 1, 2, 3. So we want to start maybe at 3 here, at 3. So let's just say 3, and then let's check also the bottom. Also have this. So when you're going backwards, it's actually minus. So you can actually say -3. -3, right? So let's check if that actually worked. Okay, I'm going to say this is cholera or fever. Okay, so we no longer have the trailing brackets and these quotation marks. So yeah, that's the first part of our project today. So we've managed to get information pertaining to diseases just by using the keyword disease. So yeah, wow, that's a good one. That's a good set. So let's proceed. So next we're going to focus on getting information pertaining to symptoms of a disease. So we want to utilize the issue of symptoms. We want our user to say, for example, symptoms, and then cholera. We want the user to actually get information about only the symptoms to that particular disease. As you can see, it gives us an error, internal server error, because there is no response. We haven't written a function for this yet. It doesn't know what to respond. So we also write checkers on how to handle if the bot doesn't know what to reply to the user. By the way, remember, we haven't started using machine learning yet. We're going to utilize machine learning for our chatbot development in the later stages, some natural language processing, deep learning models, integrating our models with our chatbot. So let's implement the functionality for symptoms. So we're going to say if, remember, just make sure it aligns here, if symptoms in the message that you receive from the user. What we want to do, let's create a symptoms array lists, which is an empty array, and then let's also replace. So as you can see, we're just repeating this whole process again and again, but you see where it actually changes. So let's proceed. So let's say message is equal to MSG, that is the message that you receive from the user, dot replace. We're going to replace the symptoms keyword, and then we want to replace it with nothing, and then we need to strip any trailing, sort of like any trailing spaces. So dot strip. All right. And then we need also our URL. As you can see, we're actually just repeating the same process. So let's just copy this and then just paste it here. So we're actually going to utilize the same URL and then the slash diseases, and then we're also going to get the disease here. And then we need to do also a %s, so replace this with the message that you receive from the user. And then also the same thing, we need to get this information. Here we've just passed in the URL, but we haven't gotten the information. So we're just going to say result equals to requests dot requests, and then our method is get, and then comma the URL, which is this one. And then we are also going to do the same thing. As you can see, we need to load this data into JSON. So this is how you actually work with an API. As you can see, you will see in the later stages of the course, this is how you actually utilize an API. It's just the same process again and again and again. So you will get familiarized with it by, for example, using it again. So we're going to say JSON.loads, and then what do you want to load? So let me not use autocomplete, JSON.loads. And then what you want to load? We want to load this result here. But remember, this result is actually a JSON object, this result. So what's the text for that result? So for demonstration purposes, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to print this result so that you can actually see why we are actually using the .text attribute. So I'm just going to print the result here on the terminal. Okay, so we have printed our result, and then we need the explanation. You can name this variable anything that you want, guys. Explanation is equals to, and then data, which is this data object here. So from this data object, we need to access, let's just call it. So from this data object, we need to access the disease here, and then under the disease, we need to access the symptoms, as you can see. So we have to access disease, symptoms. So now you can actually see the differences now. At first, we're accessing the disease, and then under disease, we're going to facts, and now we're accessing disease, and then we're actually going to access symptoms. So we're actually going to get symptoms for a disease right here. Okay, so you can even include the source, but let's just proceed so that you can actually see what I'm talking about. Okay, so we want to access the disease, and then under that disease, we need to access the symptoms. So this is only the difference, as you can see, the way of extracting information. Here we're accessing disease and then facts. So here we're accessing disease and then symptoms. And then let's append it into our list. So let's just say symptoms list dot. Let's just append it. And then what are we going to append? We're going to append the explanation. All right. And then once we have actually appended this information, we need to return this to the user. So response.message, and then string str, and then we need to pass in the symptoms list that actually has our information, and then we need to return this to the user. So return str response. All right, so let's do a flash scan and check it. So I'm also going straight to the point here without typing hello. So let's go symptoms malaria. I don't know why I love malaria that much, like saying it as it is, not like loving it as loving malaria, but I just don't know. Okay, it says 200. Okay, so we've received information about the symptoms of malaria. So seems everything is working. but we have also these distracting things that we don't like, as you can see. So let's count spaces: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 18. So let's pop this stuff. So what you're going to do is the same thing. Put square brackets here. Where do you want to start? On 18. And then let's just say from 18 to -1. Let's see if that actually works. Okay. Symptoms. Okay. Okay, it hasn't given a response yet. Let's check it. It should say 200 if we're okay. Okay, it says 200. It says 200 as you can see here. So it shows 200. It says okay. So we should receive our information. Okay, so we have gotten the information. So we still have these trailing spaces. We are going to solve them in the next lecture. But for now, let's just proceed. Let's just say symptoms. Fever. Okay, so we have gotten the symptoms of fever. Let's click on read more. So as you can see, we're actually developing our medical chatbot. Everything is working. As you can see, it's actually advancing in stages. So we're actually adding functionality on the go, as you can see here. So if you type hello, so we shall make actually this so as you can see, we are going to populate this with functionality. So far we have 2 functionality. So we have COVID information and disease knowledge base, but we are going to move on further: disease analysis, drug analytics, booking an appointment and stuff. So that's what we are going to do in the next lecture. So for this lecture, I guess we are done by getting information pertaining to diseases, symptoms pertaining to various diseases. So let's check it if everything is working. COVID-19 information that we wrote like the previously. Okay, so let's say COVID shader. Alright, so everything is working. So yeah, we're moving. Yeah, you have to give yourself a pat on the back, because this is not easy. I know it's a bit intimidating, especially when you're actually new to the Python programming language. So what we're going to do is we're going to develop a course on Python programming. We'll be doing a crash course on Python, giving information about Python, starting off with lists, dictionaries, and everything from the basics, so that you can actually understand the whole concept behind Python, so that you can actually utilize Python in terms of problem solving when I'm currently developing these chatbots. So we'll teach you Python to an extent that you'll be able to create logical chatbots, integrate machine learning and AI into chatbots. So this is a great opportunity. This is a great database of knowledge that we're going to give you guys. So as you can see, we can be happy. We've actually covered 2 parts here, which is searching for diseases, searching symptoms for a disease, and also searching the causes for a disease. So these are done here. These ones are done. This is done. This is done. So this is the API. Disease info. Yeah, okay, I wrote it. So disease info. So let me just remove this whole space here. Python is a language which actually works with spaces, which they call indentions. So as you can see, mind it if you actually miss a space. Let me show you what happens if you actually miss a space. So let me write it here. As you can see, if you notice it, it's actually telling you, could you know, this should be here. It gives you sort of like an indicator in VS Code saying this should be here. So if, let's say I push this, it says no, this should be here. So you have to push it back, and then the lines just disappear. So thank you for watching this tutorial. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your patience. I know it's a bit tedious, but we are going somewhere, we are getting somewhere. So have a great day. Thank you.